The point to be especially understood, particularly with regard to the 10th stage, is that contemplation of gladness induced in each stage by the power of one. Pointedness and non-distraction is what is called establishment or foundation of mindfulness. Mindfulness or recollection, when applied to watching gladness so closely that it is seen as impermanent, unsatisfactory and no self, is referred to as insight knowledge, and this is briefly called knowledge. The meditator develops the contemplation of the mind, which is endowed with different kinds of gladness, by means of that establishment of mindfulness, satipana, and that knowledge, insight knowledge, and this practice of his is called Satipana. Satipana bhavana, it is bhavana, development complete in all the four definitions or senses. At that time, the mind, being one-pointed and non-distracted by means of in and out breathing, the meditator gathers together as usual all the 29 dhammas, knows their domain, samatha, and penetrates their benefit of calm, gakara. As usual. Stage 11, the guideline for practicing the 11th stage of anapanasati is, concentrating the mind, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Concentrating the mind, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. The explanation is as follows: the essence of the point, he trains himself, is in all respects the same as dealt with in the 10th stage and especially in the 3rd stage. The points considered with regard to the threefold training which are to be especially understood, particularly in the present stage, are as follows. As far as the higher training of morality is concerned, one should know and examine properly how it is involved in the practice of the 11th stage. Fundamentally, the meditator is restrained, he has control over the mind by not letting it leave the object of contemplation in different stages. This is called sila, morality. Why is it so called?
It is so called because whenever the mind is controlled, nothing wrong is done either in body, speech, or otherwise. This observation is useful in that, through it, one is not misled into thinking that it is not present or is unnecessary in this higher stage of practice, which is crowned with both concentration and wisdom. One should therefore keep in mind that as a rule, when one restrains the mind by the power of mindfulness in any way, the training of morality is there in full in the very act of restraining, even though one is absorbed in the practice of anapanasati on such high levels as, for instance, at the present stage. Restraint of morality plays its part to the full as usual. Thus there are the three aspects of the training by way of harmonious unity of dhammas in full swing. Therefore, the expression he trains himself here, and in all of the remaining stages, has the meaning of training oneself fully in all the three aspects of the training. As far as concentration and wisdom are concerned, the state of affairs is clear. As we saw in every stage, especially from the 3rd stage onwards, there is focusing of the mind on the respective objects leading to concentration. Simultaneously there is penetrating of the objects as impermanent, etc. leading to wisdom. But as for the aspect of sila, it is invisibly present, and one must know how to examine to see it clearly. In the first 3 stages of anapanasati, the meditator is restrained by mindfully controlling the mind so as to apply it to the breathing in different modes and manners. This restraint on his part fulfills sila. In the 4th stage, restraining, which is more difficult than the 4, is manifested by making efforts to gradually calm down the breathing. Restraint in the 5th and 6th stages is manifested by noting rapture and bliss with unswerving non-delusion, i.e., to be restrained as regards yielding to their attraction.
In the 7th stage, restraint can be seen in watching feelings closely in their function of conditioning the mind. In the 8th stage, restraint manifests in do not condition the mind, or if they do so to the minimum. In the 9th stage, restraint is blended with watching closely and observing different states of mind. In the 10th stage, it is involved in encouraging the mind to be gladdened and with contemplating different kinds of gladness as impermanent, etc., so that one is not intoxicated by them. Restraint in the 11th stage can be seen in striving to uphold the mind to be concentrated in various ways. All this restraint, as manifested in different stages, is always essentially sila or accomplishment of the training of higher morality at hisalasika in each case, and the same way morality should be understood in connection with the remaining 5 stages. All this will not be discussed again at length, except to throw light on some particular angle, as may be deemed necessary. The next point, concentrating the mind, is considered from two angles, that is, what is concentrating the mind, and when does it come into being? Here the expression concentrating the mind means, in essence, attaining one-pointedness. As the state of concentration can be viewed from many different angles, such questions as what concentration is can be answered by mentioning the following synonymous terms: establishment, stability, steadiness, undisturbedness, non-distraction, undisturbed attention. Tranquility, faculty of concentration, power of concentration, and right concentration. The list of synonyms is enough to give an idea of what concentration is like, though there are many more synonyms which could well be added to the list. Here is given a brief account of the above terms characterizing concentration so as to render them clear. First of all, it should be borne in mind that establishment, stability, etc. all refer to the state of the mind called concentration samadhi.
Now to take them one by one. 1. Establishment means the mind is established, unshaken by any of the hindrances, nvara. 2. Stability means that the mind is stabilized, firmly established, and able to fight with the stimuli of different hindrances. 3. Steadiness means the mind is not unsteady or lacking in firmness and cannot be allured or overpowered by any stimuli. 4. Undisturbedness. The Pali term for this avasaharo, which is a metaphorical expression literally translated as state free from poisoning of food. When food becomes poisoned in the stomach, one feels restless like a man going to die. One is disturbed in one's activities, unable to do any work, not cheerful nor in any way in a happy mood. The mind is the same when there is inward poisoning of the mind. The mind is dead to the good, it is disturbed and cannot be exercised for any action. It loses its freshness and is not bright, therefore the state of concentration of the mind is compared to the physical state free from or undisturbed by poisoned food. 5. Non-distraction means that the mind is fixed on one single object and does not wander in the jungle of sense objects. The mind is in a state comparable to that of an animal who, having got enough of what he wants in his lair, does not wander hither and thither like a monkey, jumping from one tree to another, searching for fruits throughout the jungle. 6. Undisturbed attention. The Pali expression for this is anapanasati, which literally means the state of mind being unaffected by poison. Poison here means hindrances and the host of all other defilements. When defilements do not affect the mind, it remains calm in its natural way. That the mind is unaffected means it is free from the promptings of defilements, for instance, the promptings of craving, aversion, etc. When all such defilements are absent from the mind is calm and concentrated.
7. Tranquility. The mind is calm and at peace with no more struggling, free from the force of passions, it is undefiled and cool. 8. Faculty of concentration. This means concentration which is developed fully so that it is one of the chief or predominant qualities. 9. Power of concentration. This term has virtually the same meaning as the preceding one in that it refers to concentration which is fully developed so that it is one of the powers used to oppose the forces of hindrances. Point 10. Right concentration. This is to be understood as proper and correct concentration, which is a constituent of the Noble Eightfold Path. As taught in Buddhism, there are outside Buddhism various kinds of concentration of mind. There are multifarious ways of concentrating the mind, which upon going astray lead to wrong concentration mika samadhi. None of them are intended here. When one thinks over the implications of each of these 10 terms in all their subtleties, one can thoroughly understand what concentration samadhi is like. From the practical point of view, concentration defined precisely in the light of anapanasati is one-pointedness and non-distraction of mind by means of long and short breathing in and out. Or to put it in other words, by means of breathing in and out, concentrating the mind. The mind becomes one-pointed without any distraction, that is called samadhi. The essence of all this is, when one has an object for contemplation and focuses one's mind on it, the very act of focusing is called concentration. No matter whether it is low, medium or high, moderate or subtle, it is all equally referred to as concentration. That is all about the meaning of concentration. As mentioned above, concentration is present all the time one focuses one's mind on an object. This is a general fact about concentration. What is more, concentration can be found even at the time of developing insight, vipassana, that is, when the mind contemplates the object by way of penetrating its characteristics of impermanence, etc. Therefore, to sum up the whole theme, it can be said that there is concentration on three main levels on three occasions. 1. Concentration at the time of the beginning of focusing on an object. This refers preparatory concentration and access concentration. 2. Concentrating at the time when the mind is fixed and has reached absorption. This is full concentration. 3. Finally, there is concentration, which is called anantarika samadhi, going along with wisdom, panna, at the time when there is focusing on an object, contemplating its characteristics of impermanence, etc. 1. Concentration in the first case is concentration in the initial stage of focusing on an object. It is concentration in an indirect or implied sense, that is, it is not of a sufficiently high standard to be called pure concentration. It is comparable to a child not yet fully matured into a man. Nevertheless, to have concentration in its undeveloped form is still better than not to have it at all. The essence of concentration on this first level is, as soon as the meditator undertakes the practice of concentration, he begins to have, from the very outset, concentration in its undeveloped form, and as he goes on practicing he achieves access concentration. This is the state of concentration in which the mental hindrances, vara, sometimes calm down, sometimes spring up again, or, at the most, are weakened, because the factors of jhana, which make for full concentration, have not yet been firmly established. Therefore, concentration in this early stage is concentration in the implied or indirect sense. However, it is, as said, worth attempting anyway. 2. In the second case, full concentration, anapanasati, refers to the state of absorption, which is pure concentration in the full sense of the term samadhi.
When we speak about concentration in its literal sense, we mean attainment of absorption on one level or the other, whether material, based on form, or immaterial, based on non-form. If the meditator wants to attain the immaterial or formless absorptions based on non-form, through practicing anapanasati, he may do so in this 11th stage. An explanation has been given to this effect elsewhere, because here we are only really concerned with the four material absorptions based on form. Point 3. In the third case, concentration is inseparably connected with wisdom, panna, and is, like concentration in the first case, regarded as such in the applied sense, because at this stage wisdom predominantly performs its function side by side with the power of concentration. How do concentration and wisdom become connected? The process is as follows. First, the meditator focuses his attention on an object of concentration and finally attains absorption. He stays in absorption for some time, the period needed to get the mind straightened and wieldy, and then he emerges from absorption. Having come out of absorption, B takes up an object for developing insight, vipassana, for instance, feeling, vedana, and contemplates it, penetrating its characteristics of impermanence, etc. This time, the power of concentration involved is the very act of contemplation. Concentration is harmoniously blended with wisdom in due proportion, i.e., when contemplating by developing wisdom becomes intensified. The power of concentration becomes proportionately intensified if contemplation slows down. The power of concentration is correspondingly slowed down. All this happens automatically without any intention on the part of the meditator. This kind of concentration is called concentration at the time of developing insight, vipassana. And for this reason it is referred to here as concentration in an implied sense.
However, this is higher in value than concentration in the first case, which is also concentration by implication, since it is not full concentration. From the characteristics of the above-mentioned three levels of concentration, it becomes clear when concentration comes into being, at what time, what characteristics and functions it has. All this makes one thoroughly understand the state of the mind when it is concentrated. The main principle in the 11th stage of anapanasati is to concentrate the mind by means of breathing in and out. The meditator must therefore go back as usual and start practicing from the first stage onward in order to contemplate, as object, the state of concentration of mind, which has different characteristics in the various stages. At this time, the essence of the training is to focus attention on the state of concentration. No matter in what stage of anapanasati one is training oneself, in the light of the explanation of the preceding stages, one can see that, although there is training in a particular stage of anapanasati bearing the same name and dealing with the same theme, yet the way of contemplation is different. To give an illustration, when the meditator trains himself in the first stage, he focuses his attention on the breathing in and out itself. But when he comes to train himself in the 11th stage and for this purpose returns to the first stage, he does not directly focus his attention on the breathing as such, but instead must contemplate the state of concentration of the mind, whatever its degree of development at that time, by means of breathing in and out. In this way, beginning from the first stage, he moves onwards in order to note and examine the state of concentration of mind in all subsequent stages of anapanasati. In each particular stage, he notes by seeing what degree of concentration has developed and what level it has reached. He knows clearly in which stage
and which way concentration gradually becomes blended with insight, vipassana, or wisdom, panna. In this way, eventually, through his own experience, he knows concentration of all kinds or types from all aspects and angles. In all degrees and levels, we can, therefore, see clearly that even though the meditator recommences from the first stage, the way of concentration is different. To sum up, training in this 11th stage implies training in contemplating all kinds of concentration existing in all stages from the point of view of both tranquility, samatha, and insight, vipassana, with the result that one is well versed in concentrating the mind skillfully in every way, as one wishes. As for the explanation of the last point, how, at this time of practice, does knowledge and mindfulness together with other allied dhammas arise? One should know that when, by means of breathing in and out, the mind is concentrated, irrespective of the level of concentration, there is manifest concentration of mind, and mindfulness which is established performing the function of contemplating that state of concentration. And thus there arises the mind which knows clearly, i.e., vinasiddha, and all this accounts for insight knowledge, anapanasati. As explained previously, such being the case, there is contemplating the mind in the mind by the power of mindfulness to the extent that concentrated as the mind is, it is, on all levels, pierced through as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and no self. When the practice proceeds in this way, it is termed siddhanupasanasatipannabhavana. It is bhavana, development, complete in all the four definitions or senses, pages 350-357. At this time of practice, there is gathering together of all the 29 kinds of dhammas together with knowing their domain, gakara, and penetrating their benefit of calm, samatha, as explained in the 5th stage.